In today's video, we're going to be delving into the world of witchcraft. And we're not talking about bubbling cauldrons and pointy Halloween hats, but the tangled roots of real-life history, focusing on the Pendle witch trials. Witchcraft sits in the curious crossroads between history and folklore, fear and power. For centuries, it's been both a source of comfort and a weapon of accusation. But before it became a costume, it was a matter of life and death. Before we visit Pendle, we're taking a trip to Haddon Hall in Bakewell. Haddon Hall sits above the River Wye, enduring for centuries. Its oldest walls reach back to the 12th century, and over time it grew into a fortified medieval manor. Unlike many great houses, it was never torn down or rebuilt, which means its bones still carry the flesh of the Middle Ages. We're starting our journey here today at their Autumn Witchcraft exhibition, an exploration of belief in Elizabethan England. The Witchcraft exhibition digs into the real fears and everyday rituals of early modern England. In its rooms, you'll find objects tied to folk magic and protection, herbs, wands, and much more. Folk magic in various forms had existed for a long time in England, but by the 1500s and early 1600s, those old beliefs collided with politics and religion in explosive ways. The Reformation had cracked open Europe's old certainties, and England was caught in the storm. King James I, convinced that witches plotted against his throne, published his Demonology in 1597, a book that declared witchcraft a real and present danger. It gave teeth to suspicion, and Parliament followed with laws that made witchcraft a crime. Witch hunts were never just about witches. They were about power, about gender, poverty, inequality. The accused were almost always people living on the margins, poor, widowed, old, or simply odd. At Haddon Hall, you will find witch marks carved into the very fabric of the building. These marks can be found in many old buildings, circles, lines, or symbols scratched into wood and stone to protect against evil spirits. This mark is called a daisy wheel, and it was believed if a demon saw the daisy wheel, they would get trapped following the lines. Scorch marks on the timber here were believed to protect the building against fire. Witchcraft first became a capital offence under Henry VIII's 1542 Witchcraft Act, though this law was soon repealed. Under Elizabeth I in 1563, witchcraft returned as a serious crime, punishable by death if harm was done by magical means. The harshest turn came with King James I's 1604 Act, which made any dealings with spirits or the devil a hanging offence, fueling notorious cases like the Pendle trials. The earliest recorded English witch trial after the 1542 Act took place in Chelmsford in 1566, when 3 women, Elizabeth Frances, Agnes Waterhouse, and her daughter Joan, were accused of using familiars and making pacts with the devil. Agnes Waterhouse was hanged, becoming one of England's first recorded executions for witchcraft. Soon after, pamphlets and sermons spread the idea that witches were real agents of evil, not just village healers or wise women. These early trials laid the groundwork for what would follow: the fear, the spectacle, and the tragic logic that would reach its height in the great witch hunts of the 16th and 17th centuries. So I've got a very exciting video for you today, and we've got a few interesting sites to visit. We're going to go to Haddon Hall and see their witchcraft exhibition. We're going to go to Pendle and learn about the witches there, and just get some overall context on what did witchcraft look like at this time and what was going on with all the witch trials. Because witchcraft wasn't made illegal until the 1500s. And in this time, you had a society of people who didn't have modern medicine the way that we do now, of course. So they would rely on herbal healers, practitioners, cunning folk, people who were in tune with herbs and nature and had this knowledge that would be passed down from generation to generation. So Elizabeth had a situation where she decided to never get married and never have children. That was something that she wanted, and so that meant that her first cousin, I think it's first cousin once removed, Mary Queen of Scots' son, was in line for the throne after she died. So he came onto the throne under a united kingdom, and he was obsessed with witches. He wrote a book about witches, how to identify them, find them, that sort of thing. And this really strengthened the witch craze. And it was thought at that time, if you were a witch, you had sold your soul to the devil, or you were interacting with demons, and that's what gave you powers. So this witch craze spread across the whole of the UK. About 500 people were executed in England and about 2,500 in Scotland for being a witch, of which about 80% were women. So we're going to explore that today and learn a little bit about some of the witch trials in particular and what was going on at this time, why was there such a craze about witches, and what did it really mean to be a witch. So we're just walking through the beautiful village of Barley, which is absolutely gorgeous. It's like something from the Shire, something. It's just beautiful. And what we're going to do is walk along to the sculpture trail. There is a trail in the forest with different sculptures about the Pendle witches, including a witchfinder statue. So we're going to go and have a look at that and have a little wander around the forest. So you can see the infamous Pendle Hill there. And there is a walking route that you can do all the way up, and we can see a few people on there. So I'm currently in the village of Barley, and this is where a lot of the events surrounding the Pendle witch trials took place. So it's really important to remember about the Pendle witch trials is that a lot of the evidence is kind of unreliable. So a lot of the things that I'm going to be saying are from the written accounts of the clerk who was there present at the trials, and he was recording everything that was talked about. But a lot of the confessions that were given might have been given under duress, under false promises. We just don't really know. So I just want to preface what I'm saying with that information. So the story of the Pendle witches is quite interesting, and essentially there was a family called the Devis family who were known locally for being folk magic practitioners, into herbal medicine and that sort of thing. And one of the members of the family, Alison Devis, was walking through the woods when she came across a peddler, and the peddler was selling different things and she asked him for some pins, and we don't know whether she was begging the pins. This could be quite likely because they were probably quite expensive back then, or whether she was trying to buy them, but for whatever reason he didn't want to give her these pins, and as she turned away she sort of muttered a curse under her breath and the man dropped to the floor. So we think now that he probably had a stroke, and he was able to go to a nearby inn and make a full recovery, and it could have ended there because he wasn't actually going to take the matter any further. But his son and Alison herself were both concerned about what had happened, and apparently Alison, according to her testimony, felt really bad about what happened, and she believed that she was the cause for his injury. His son also reported it to the local magistrate, Roger Noel, and an investigation started. So in her confession, apparently she said that she had done this thing, she was a witch, and she also implicated a few other people as well, among them members of her own family, including her grandmother, who was referred to as Old Demdike. And if you are into witchcraft or witch history or anything like that, you've probably come across this name. She's a pretty infamous witch. And this is sort of what kicked off the trials. So they were taken to Lancaster and kept there awaiting a trial. So while they were awaiting trial at the castle, there was essentially a bit of a party, a bit of a meal thrown in the Devis household. So her mother was there, her brother, her little sister, and a nearby family called the Chattocks family. And allegedly they all had a meal together. And there are different rumours about what was happening at this meal. Some people say that it was when they were supposed to be at church, so that was a really bad thing. Some people say that they stole a sheep from the neighbour to eat. Some people say things like they were plotting to blow up Lancaster Castle. So there's all sorts of different stories that have come about because of it. But that is sort of what kicked off the next chain of events, which is they were all implicated and they were taken to Lancaster Castle as well. So there were 12 people awaiting trial, not just the Devis family, but other people as well. And what happens now gets really interesting because one of the Devises, called Janet, was only 9 years old. And essentially what happened from there is that she gave a testimony at court which completely implicated her whole family for witchcraft, and she stood there and said, yes, my family are witches, these are the things they've done. And it was basically because of this 9-year-old girl, which is child testimony, which was quite unusual even for then. She essentially got her family convicted of witchcraft, and the Devis family were hanged due to that. Old Demdike had actually died already in the dungeon. She was in her 80s. It was very harsh conditions down there, so she didn't even make it to the trial. But we do have other records, and she did give a testimony and a confession, and apparently she said that she had a spirit familiar. She said that she would make things out of clay for witchcraft. So it's all well recorded. It's very interesting. How much of it is truth, we will never truly know. So 12 people went into the castle for witchcraft. 10 of them were hanged. 1 died in the dungeon, and then 1 was acquitted. And one of the witches there as well was called Alice Nutter, who was on trial for the apparent murder of her husband, and she's quite a well-known witch as well. So it's a really interesting trial because we've got all this written evidence, we've got child testimony, we've got people implicating their own family members, confessing to making pacts with demons, all sorts of things. So these trials took place at a time when the witchcraft craze was well and truly running through the country. Lancashire was thought to be a bit of a lawless wasteland, full of Catholics when the rest of the country was Protestant, full of miscreants, people up to no good. And this is one of the most well-documented trials and really interesting to delve into if you're interested in learning about witchcraft in England. The Pendle witch trials can be difficult to untangle. Two families sat at the uneasy heart of things, the Demdikes and the Chaddocks. They were already known locally as cunning folk, but their reputations were tangled with local rivalries. Some, like the elderly matriarch Elizabeth Southern's Old Demdike, were already known as witches by local gossip long before the trial began. And so we're finishing up our trip here at Lancaster Castle. Okay, so this is the well tower where the witches were imprisoned. And they were actually held down in this dungeon. And this is where Demdike passed away, down there in the dungeon. Standing there, it's easy to imagine the damp walls, the stench of the cell, and the knowledge that mercy was not coming. I often think about young Janet Davis, just 9 years old. I wonder how she felt as she grew older and began to understand what she had been made to do. Her entire family gone at her own evidence. What truly went into exacting that kind of testimony from a child? By the early 18th century, the witch hunts in England were fading into history. The rise of science, Enlightenment philosophy, and a more sceptical press began to challenge the old certainties that had once made witchcraft seem so real. Courts grew wary of spectral evidence and confessions wrung from fear, and the public appetite for executions dwindled. The 1736 Witchcraft Act marked the formal end. The state no longer believed in witches, only in fraudsters who pretended to perform magic for financial gain. Yet the legacy of those centuries of fear is harder to erase. The witch trials left deep scars in local memory and folklore, especially in places like Pendle. In our modern times, the figure of the witch is transforming from a symbol of evil into one of resistance, independence, and the misunderstood. The trials may have ended, but the questions they raise about belief, fear, and justice still linger today.